Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People. In today's episode, my uncle is draining my 100-year-old grandfather's bank account dry every month. My carry-on is your discomfort. Mr. Crass didn't pay me, so no one else would work for him either. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. My uncle is draining my 100-year-old grandfather's bank account dry every month. Background: my maternal grandfather had two children, my mom and my uncle. Grandma died 30+ years ago. Mom died 3 years ago. Up until last year, Grandpa lived with my drug addict uncle in an apartment in a suburb of my city. When my uncle passed out while standing up and hurt his hip so badly he had to go to the hospital for surgery and rehab almost 2 years ago, my sibs and I realized just how bad Grandpa's living conditions in that cesspool of an apartment were. The heavily blood-stained bedsheets alone would be enough to make you barf. It took me a few months due to my own living situation, but I was able to move Grandpa in with me last year. We had to strip him down and change him into brand new clothes without letting them touch any surface, have him walk barefoot to the car, and bring nothing with him but his walker, wallet, phone, charger, and glasses case. So far, it appears we avoided bringing any bedbugs along. My uncle didn't want me to, of course, but what was he gonna do? Any complaint or call he tried to make would result in someone from some agency seeing his apartment and him getting evicted at best and arrested at worst. Grandpa was in such bad shape, I was 100% positive all I could do was let him spend his last few days or weeks in a clean, pleasant environment. Instead, he went from a size medium to a size extra large, celebrated his 100th birthday, and is still going strong. At my uncle's, he always claimed he wasn't hungry, but now that no one was telling him they couldn't afford food, he had a 100% normal appetite, mostly for pudding, but he's under doctor's orders to eat whatever he wants. I bought him a bed, mattress, clothes, 2 whole wardrobes when he gained weight from actually being able to eat, things to store them in, a comfy chair, and a table. He's still using the Android I got him a few weeks after Mom died since he couldn't borrow hers anymore. He can never remember how to text or make calls, but he can answer calls and loves to surf the web. It's on my plan, and I pay the whole bill. The cable and internet had been shut off at the apartment for months, so I'd upgraded to an unlimited data plan, and it had been his only source of entertainment there. I don't take any money from him for utilities or other household expenses. My roommate allowed him to use a mini fridge, nightstand, and 2 lamps that he's not using. My brother bought him a TV and brought over an entertainment center from his garage to display it. The grandkids and great-grandkids are able to come visit him. No one but me could bear to set foot in that filthy apartment even before we realized how severe the conditions were. No way could we subject children to it. We've had 2 big parties for his 100th birthday and Father's Day. We have 4 cats here whom he loves to receive visits from throughout the day. I registered him to vote at this address and order him a mail-in ballot every primary and general election. I was able to get him set up with the VA's home care program, so VA doctors come give him checkups, give him vaccines, draw his blood for testing, etc. here at home, something my uncle never could have done even if he had the energy to be aware of it because he couldn't let medical personnel see the filth he was living in there. A social worker came to meet with him and got his wishes regarding care and end of life on the record. They have a home health aide come 3 times a week to do bathing, shaving, etc. And connected us with a podiatrist who makes house calls for the elderly for nail care. Yes, old people's nails really are incredibly thick and stiff and can't just be clipped the way we do to ours, but I digress, so his toenails are no longer sharp and gnarly. In short, his life and health are a million times better and happier here. My sister, a medical assistant, regularly texts me thanking me for taking him in so he wouldn't end up in the nursing homes she sees on the job. It was around Father's Day this year that my dad voiced what I'd been feeling for a while but never said aloud or let myself fully consciously think, that I saved his life. Story: my uncle handed over Grandpa's debit card when we moved him out. He must have known I would just apply for a new one for him if he didn't. I'd snagged a bank statement from the apartment in the weeks leading up to moving him out, so I had Grandpa's account number, and Grandpa knows his own social security number, thank goodness, or I wouldn't be able to refill his prescriptions by phone. So with his consent and participation, I set up mobile banking for his account on my phone for monitoring his balance and when he gets his social security and war pension deposits. Most expenses are paying for meds online, Instacart orders, and $300 a month to a debt collector because of course he just gave my mom his credit card a few years before she literally drank herself to death, and no one was making payments on it for years. We got the letter about that not long after I filed his change of address. The debt was in his name, and I didn't want to deal with the headache of them continuing to come after him while he was alive or after he died, so I set up a monthly payment plan online. It'll be paid off in 3 more months. My uncle had also let Grandpa's medical bills go unpaid for a while and had eventually signed him up for a tiny monthly payment plan for that, because paying it all at once would have meant less money for my uncle to take at the time. I paid off the balance all at once. Naturally, my uncle took all his money when Grandpa lived with him. The first month after we moved him out, my uncle tried to tell me Grandpa still owed him half the rent every month because his name was on the lease. I believed him but called the manager at the number listed in their lobby and asked when their lease was up and shared the story of how I had to move him out because my uncle could no longer care for him. The manager was confused. Grandpa's name wasn't on the lease, only my uncle's. You don't say? My uncle never responded to my text mocking him for such a stupid lie. But just because Grandpa was out from under his roof didn't mean the requests for money stopped. For one, my uncle had already entered Grandpa's debit card in the Grubhub app on his phone, so he still regularly uses it to order Grubhub several times a month, was doing it almost daily before I finally lost my temper over it via text. They both have Cash App on their phone, and while Grandpa doesn't know how to use it, when my uncle asks for money, Grandpa always consents, so I have to send it, or Grandpa would get beyond distressed and upset. Grandpa doesn't have dementia or anything. For 100, his mental faculties are incredible. He can't remember what day it is and will ask the same question 3 times in 1 minute, but he recognizes everyone, he can read and watch TV and comprehend it all, tell you what he needs, and, except for some repeating, have completely normal conversations. But he's always been a sucker when my leech of a mom and uncle ask for money. He is literally incapable of saying no. And if I just refused to let him do it or refused to let him talk to my uncle, like blocked his number or something, it would just upset him. So my uncle keeps requesting money daily starting halfway through every month, and he always gets it. Tonight, he agreed to give my uncle $56. Too bad, it's the end of the month, and he's broke. And so am I really am. I get paid in 2 days. I didn't tell Grandpa he's broke because he wouldn't understand why and would panic, but I did break down all expenses he had this month and texted the amounts to my uncle to prove he was broke and that it wasn't because I'm taking money from him. Between Grubhub and his constant requests for money, my uncle took $789.34 this month alone from the 100-year-old father he almost neglected literally to death. I took $35 for 2 Uber rides so I could get home faster to make him dinner on 2 days. Grandpa has told me my money's your money to use how I want because I take care of him. I would never do that, but I do occasionally use it for Uber rides home only if I'm going home to do chores or make dinner, never for anything fun. And what did my uncle respond? I should never have set up a payment plan for the debt from that unpaid credit card bill. They would never go after a 100-year-old man. Yeah, that's the problem. I told him to take it up with them or mom, and he didn't reply. Never pay any debt is my uncle's philosophy of life. When an electric bill came when he was in the hospital, he told me to just send them $50 so they won't turn the lights off. I paid the whole $200 plus balance from Grandpa's card because I didn't trust it worked that way, and the thought of Grandpa being alone in the apartment when the power went out bothered me more than him having less money in his account for my uncle to take. I shared the numbers with my sisters and dad. They agree it's unconscionable but also have no idea how to stop it because Grandpa just won't say no, and the only alternative is upsetting him by refusing to let him keep giving the money. Would it be worth it? Would it be safe for his health? We're not afraid of our uncle getting the law or anyone involved. Again, getting any outsiders involved in his business is a risk he cannot take no matter what, but of the effect it would have on Grandpa. We currently get along great. If he starts seeing me as an enemy or lashing out at me, our living arrangement would be a disaster. That seems to be the only way to stop his son from bleeding him dry, and despite our rage over his son using him this way to fund his drug habit, nobody's suggesting we risk that. And people say your kids will take care of you in your old age. Ha! Report the debit card stolen. They'll send a new one to your house, then uncle will have to ask for money every time he wants something. It won't stop grandpa from giving away money, but at least he will be in charge instead of just having it taken behind his back. If it's SSI or RSDI, become his rep payee and you handle his money. It's an easy process, and then you don't have to worry about your uncle anymore because you will have control over the money and explain it to your grandfather that his money needs to stay in the household he's living in and he needs to stop supporting someone who is stealing from him. I wish you all the best, but I would cut your uncle off. There are legal ways as well that your grandfather would not have a say-so, and you can go down that road as well. However, he won't have access to his own money then, and I think that will take away from his independence at 100. OP can set up a special debit card for Gramps. Kind of like what parents do with their kids at college. He can put a specific amount on it each month. Delete Cash App or turn off requests to all the apps they are sending. Order a new debit card. Maybe ask if you can be put on his bank account or speak with his bank about no longer allowing funds to be sent due to scamming. Threaten your uncle with elderly abuse if he continues and tell him if he mentions it that you will proceed. That shouldn't be an empty threat either. Cut off the debit card first so he can't use it for Grubhub or Cash App. Then talk to grandpa and tell him that uncle needs to be on a weekly allowance to help him learn to manage his bills. So you aren't cutting him off entirely, which would upset grandpa, but you're preventing him from misusing grandpa's money. It will take a lot of reminding grandpa that uncle got his allowance for the week. He'll have to manage for a couple more days. Make it a ritual. After Sunday dinner, you transfer money to uncle's account. Via your Cash App, take the app completely off grandpa's phone. And tell uncle that if he makes a fuss, you're going to completely cut off the money. Give grandpa a huge hug from this internet stranger. And pat yourself on the back too. Cancel the Grubhub connection. Get a different bank account for grandpa if you have to. Change banks immediately. Get new cards. Make sure all subscriptions/apps are canceled/deleted. Might want to report elder abuse/theft. Get a restraining order if possible. My carry-on is your discomfort. So I was merely a witness to this. This was a long time ago, so keep that in mind. I was flying home from a business trip and was on a full flight. At the last minute, a business traveler boards the flight with a lot of carry-on luggage. Gets to his seat and all the overhead bins are full. The FA tells him he needs to check his luggage for storage in the bottom of the plane. He loses his mind making excuses about appointments and can't wait for baggage claim. He then says he can put the luggage on the floor of the person sitting next to him, and this other person can put their feet up on top of his luggage for the next 4 hours. The FA says no, check the luggage or rebook. I did a contract at a large European airline and I got to see all the safety reports that were raised every day. You would not believe the number of people who get thrown off flights because they kick off when they can't put their bag directly above their seat. Would bags on the floor be considered a safety risk? They could get tossed about if there is major turbulence? That's why, when I had to carry my daughter's wedding dress cross-country, I paid for premium seating so I could get guaranteed overhead space, being one of the first to board. Plan ahead or deal with the consequences. Often, they will make exceptions for wedding dresses and hang them with coats in first class. But it's always good to be prepared and polite. Probably too late now, but for future information, most planes are designed to have a special spot for hanging tuxes, dresses, etc. It's enclosed like a closet so nothing can get spilled on them. Plus, the flight attendants love to see the dresses and take great care of them. Sounds like the entitled flyer has a time management problem. Gets to the airport at the last minute and doesn't have time to wait at bag claim. That is a him problem and shouldn't inconvenience anyone else. I was on a flight once, and as we were waiting to board, a woman traveling with her young daughter with a full-sized suitcase and massive handbag caught my eye. She had a full-sized suitcase, her daughter had a smaller case and a bag that was probably just within the carry-on allowance. She seemed shocked the flight was full and spent 3 hours with her bags pressed up against her legs and her daughter's legs. She did try to move one of the cases into the aisle but was told to move it back pretty fast. I heard stories of old school pro wrestlers' travel etiquette when on planes. They would get to their seat, and if there was already a bag in their overhead bin, they would simply throw it into the aisle. Must be related to the guy in the window next to me a couple of years ago. First class on Alaska, I booked the aisle because it has a larger storage under the seat in front, and I have a giant backpack that more or less fills the whole thing. Window seat has a little larger than standard one. I get to the seat and the guy in the window seat has his bag in my storage and says we'll be sharing that one. Nope. I didn't quite have to call a flight attendant, but he was mad the whole 6.5-hour flight. Sorry, dude. Even if I'd had a smaller bag and they both would fit, I'd want the extra space for my feet, not his bag. Mr. Crass didn't pay me, so no one else would work for him either. Taking more of a departure from stories about my mother and sister, here's one about a guy I'll call Mr. Crass. Now this happened a long time ago in 2003. So nearly 20 years. And I was 13 at the time. Mr. Crass was a crotchety old man in his 80s who lived a few streets over. He'd not tended his yard for years. It was filled with junk and the grass was badly overgrown and also had thorn bushes and huge weeds everywhere. He was all of a sudden trying to sell his house, so his yard needed to be cleaned up. He hired me since I was well known in the area. When I saw the mess that was his yard, I told him it wasn't gonna be cheap as I'd have to do some serious work. Mr. Crass agreed to my price and I set about loading all of the junk into an old trailer he had ready. I used an electric weed whacker and machete to clear the overgrown brush and grass, and then mowed the front and back yards to look presentable. Now's the part you all see coming. Mr. Crass refused to pay me. It took me all weekend to clear both his front and backyard. And he said he wasn't paying me a dime because I took too long and was trying to overcharge him. Then he called me that oh-so-typical line of snot-nosed brat and slammed his front door in my face and refused to speak with me anymore. When I told my dad what Mr. Crass had done, my dad confronted him and the old man said I was a liar. Then claimed he had paid me, and I was just trying to scam him. Even though a neighbor happened to see what went on and could attest he didn't pay me. Well, I and the neighbor who saw what happened started telling everyone in the neighborhood what Mr. Crass had done. And during the night his house and car was egged. By who we still don't know. Mr. Crass believed it was me. But I didn't do it. Then he demanded I come clean the mess up. I said he'd have to pay me for the work I'd already done first. So he balked at me and said that he could find some other sap to clean his yard for him. But I guess no one did because he didn't get help from anyone. He ended up having to repaint the front of his house because the egg had set in, and a pressure washer wasn't enough to get it out without chipping the old paint off. Mr. Crass then tried to keep from paying the painters too. And they threatened to take him to court for non-payment. So he was forced to pay. Months later his lawn became very overgrown again. And no one had bought his house. No one in the neighborhood would work for him to mow his grass either. He called me begging for me to clean up his heart again. But I said I wouldn't do jack until he paid me what he owed me. He still tried to claim he had paid me, and that I was being cruel to a hobbled old man. I said I really didn't care. If you hire someone, you pay them. I wasn't going to give him charity. Especially after what he'd done. Well, he hung up on me and kept trying to hire someone else. A professional landscaper would want several times as much as I charged. So he didn't hire one. Mr. Crass eventually did pay me. He came right to my parents' front door to surrender. And he acted like I was robbing him with every single dollar he handed over. Yes, he used as many small bills as possible. And insisted on counting them painfully slowly. When I finally got the money he owed me, I stated I also wanted payment up front to clean his yard again. Because I wasn't going to risk him refusing to pay ever again. And from then on, all payments would be full and up front. He looked like a boiling tea kettle. But he didn't have a choice. He paid me and I cleaned up his yard again and even washed his car. Not that it was any help for the car. It was some rusty old thing from the 70s. And for a good portion of the time he sat on his porch to watch me and point out every little detail. So I started saying that if he didn't stop, I'd never work for him again. So he shut up. The old man died a few months later. And his house sat for a year before someone finally bought it. His elderly daughter came by and paid me to come and mow the yard a few times so the house would still look good to a potential buyer. Fine with me. That was more money in my savings. Mr. Crass wasn't the only client I ever had that gave me trouble. But he was by a mile the worst, and the only one who tried to weasel out of paying me. A few other people who hired me wanted to debate my fee. I'm not one to dicker. And they didn't really like that. But they all still paid me what they owed. And became nice repeat clients in the long run. Which is why to this day I only really think of Mr. Crass as the only real bad client I ever had. And if you're all wondering how my mother evil mama bear felt about this, she thought the whole situation was funny. She never tried to tell off Mr. Crass, and she never really bothered to get involved. She just thought it was funny when he stiffed me. And she thought it was funny when he surrendered to finally pay me too. So in all of this, all she really did was sit back and laugh. I didn't even realize it was Kroggle until the very end. You have sure had a lifetime supply of Entitled Purple. I didn't know it was Kroggle till I read Evil Mama Bear had to skull up to see my favorite poster. Oh. It's Kroggle. Your mom and the old man deserve each other, sounds like. The way that the old guy sounded, he sounds like he and your evil mama bear would get along just fine. Now she thought it was funny because you didn't get paid for a job that you did, and she figured in her twisted mind it was karma. But at least thankfully he did pay and he found out the hard way: don't mess with people. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.